So continue to get your PPRs and your peer evaluations as those come up due in Canvas into me. Let me know what questions you have. One thing to mention, just make sure you're aware of what I'm looking for when I grade those PPRs. I'm not looking for much. It's just if you've got some drawings, make sure it's kind of clear. Is this a drawing of one of your ideas? Is this a drawing of somebody else in your group? Because really what I'm wanting to know when I look at those PPRs, can I tell what is this individual that I'm looking at, their report, what has this individual contributed this week or this week? And then can I get some idea of how the group is progressing? Those are kind of the two things I'm looking for from your PPR. So this week I was pretty liberal about giving full credit on those. I might continue to be pretty liberal about that. Just understand if there's not much detail, I don't have to give you the full point on it. So if you have questions, want to know more, I'm not asking for much. I mean, if you just want to blatantly say, well, I did this week, and then the group did this week, and then that way you're covered, that's fine. But if you're going through and putting in some entries and it's clear kind of what's there and what you're doing, you won't have to do that. So dates. And I'm as long as I can tell from what you've got there, what you did and what your group did, we're good. Okay, that's really all I'm asking on it. So trying to leave it a pretty low bar and pretty liberal about how I grade them. Just try to give you flexibility how you want to keep your records. Again, notebook, great. Digital report, that's fine. Okay, all right. How is that, especially right now, how is that helpful when a lot of you guys are probably going to be in the research phase. Remember we talked last time about the design process. We said we spent a little time last time talking about this concept of problem definition. What is it that you as a group are trying to solve? And I challenge you to work in your groups to put your problem definition in your own words. And then think about what your timeline looks like. How am I going to slice this up to make sure we get it done? And then, what does success look like? These are all things that should be kind of included within your problem definition. We said there's this idea of identify previous efforts, engineering being the application of existing knowledge to solve existing problems, to make practical use and solve practical problems. It's hard to apply existing knowledge if we don't gather the existing knowledge, okay? And that's kind of where I expect most of you guys will be is somewhere between kind of these first three steps and still trying to get a good handle on refining, getting a better definition of the problem as you learn a little more about what is the theory behind what you've been asked to do, and as well as what are some ideas that exist, what are some possible solutions, what are some things that make sense for us. So I expect most of us are probably going to be in this region, and that's perfectly fine. In the near future, we'll take a day and we'll talk a little bit about concept evaluation for a later class period. And then the goal here is working our way to a final design. Today, what I want to do is just rehash research just very briefly. It goes hand in hand with a little further discussion about personal progress reports, PPRs, and then spend a little time talking about synthesis and brainstorming and turn you guys loose. As you're doing research, as you're learning, as you're gathering existing knowledge and getting inspiring ideas, as you're doing searches, see what's available, see what solutions exist. We mentioned Thingiverse and places like that. If you're for 3D printing files, is a pretty good place to get inspiration. Maybe not a final design, but maybe that's a neat way to solve that problem. It's a really good place to get some ideas for that. But also then just again, what is the general theory? And as you're searching for things, especially if you're searching for something very, very specific, or some very specific knowledge or a very specific solution, what I can tell you from experience is have your notebook handy or whatever you're keeping your PPRs in handy, and make note of what keyword phrases you've used that have gotten you good results and what keyword phrases didn't get you good results, because Again, just tell you from experience, if you're spending hours going through sometimes looking for something very specific, and you get to the point where you have to walk away and take a break. So we get you some caffeine for stretch, whatever you got to do. I think CDC recently or a health organization recently said they're in a sedentary job every 30 minutes, you really should try to get up and stretch and move a little bit before you keep going. So all that to say, if you're just, I mean, really digging into the internet or searching or looking up stuff, and you get up and you take a break, and it's real easy to come back as like, the heck I've already looked at. I don't even remember if you'll write down what are where did you search? What were the things you searched for? This one got me good results. This one didn't get me good results. Don't do that one again. These are good things to try to keep a record of. Where did I find good information? Where did I not find good information? In your report is a group you guys are gonna have to put together a report at the end of the semester. And so if I find a good source and I need to be able to go back and cite that as additional information for our report, you don't have to build a complete MLA or APA reference cited entry in your notebook, but you want enough information so when we go to generate the report, that you can do that and do that accurately. Okay, so all things to think about as you're gaining new knowledge as you work your way through. All right, so I've mentioned the PPRs a little bit here, personal progress reports. As I mentioned, make sure you've got dates on there and make sure as I read through those, I don't have to go too long here, but make sure as I read through those, I can get an idea of what you as the individual have done this week and what you as a group has set out to accomplish this week. But again, make sure your entries are dated there. I'm really just trying to have some record of each individual, what progress they're making as you make your way through. So if I get myself in a situation where I've got the Ringo that just hasn't done anything, I have some documentation. And a lot of times that's an individual that has not submitted any PPRs. So that's documentation in and of itself that, well, I can't show that you've done anything. So I don't know why you're arguing about these points on your final grade. Mentioned again, how you want to keep your PPRs. I'm pretty free about how you want to do that. If you want to keep them in a notebook, that is recommended. If you've come through one of these technology centers where they've got pre-engineering programs and a lot of times they have a very rigorous template they want you to follow when they have you keep your design notebooks. If that is helpful for you, please feel free to employ that. That's a little more rigorous than I'm asking for, but it is a very good way to go about it. If you went and, if you want to know more about how do I keep good, rigorous design notebook entries, let's talk. In general, you date at the top of the page. And anywhere that you're intentionally leaving blank, you're supposed to put X's through so a lawyer can't go back later and argue, oh, well, you left all this blank space so you could go back and backdate your entries and falsify the order of ideation. No, if I've marked out, if I left this half page blank, I've marked it out so I can go back and put stuff in it later. If you've got something you really want to protect, make sure you've signed it. So there's all kinds of really good practices. As I mentioned, for you guys, I don't mind you using a spiral bound notebook. If you're really trying to protect intellectual property, a spiral bound notebook's not going to hold up because you can't tell how many pages you've torn out of a spiral bound notebook. If it's one of these permanently bound notebooks or something like a Moleskine or something like that, it's going to be obvious you've torn out pages. You left blank pages so you could falsify the order of sequence. You could go back and add things in later at different dates. And I've torn out the blank pages that I didn't use. That's going to be obvious with a permanently bound structure. Spiral bound structures, not so obvious that you pull pages out. So are we producing something in this class that's going to win us a patent court case? I don't expect that's going to be the case. Although I've seen some really novel designs come out of some of the stuff that we still use in some of the labs. I've seen some pretty novel designs that arguably there may be some value to that. I just don't know that you would have to have something that there would be enough marketability to even justify the cost of going through the process. All that to say, is it a bad idea to be in the habit though of doing things that If you had an idea you really wanted to protect, and I've got a perfectly well-kept notebook that I can put that idea in it and record it, I sign it, I have somebody else sign it. It's not going to win you a court case, but it is a piece of evidence that you can use in your favor. So, what goes in the notebooks? Sketches, please. We've learned you guys with basic hand drawing tools for a reason. We talked about those early on. I want you to be able to communicate quickly to somebody. I always say, you're in the shower and you have this wonderful thought, and it's like, oh, eureka, and you got to hop out of the shower and record it. Go to your notebook and write it down. I'll obviously probably dry off first, but you do you. It's fine with me. But all that to say, we've armed you guys with some good basic hand drawing techniques, so you can put together a rough sketch and communicate it with everybody else, with your group members. That's the intention. If I'm sitting in a meeting with a client or a manager and I've got this idea and I need to get it across, I've wanted you to have some basic skills so you could roughly draw in two-dimensional sketches and three-dimensional drawings by hand quickly to get your point across, and feel free to take advantage of those here. If you look at some of my notebooks, they are not pretty. They don't have to be. I'm not judging when I look through those PPRs. I'm really not judging on quality of content. Again, I'm just looking, hey, are they organized? Did you put dates on them? Can I tell you've been productive? And does it look like you've got an idea what your group's doing? That's what I'm after. But it's your notebook. Do what is helpful and appropriate for you as the individual. I would suggest against using it as a diary or a journal. You can. I've certainly seen some people very much not be nice about their group members in these. I'm not going to share what's in this with anybody else. It's going to have to be, it's going to have to be somebody that takes me to a grade appeals, and the grade appeals committee is going to have to say, no, you got to share that. And even then, it's going to be in protest. What you put in there, unless you share it with your group members, I'm not going to. But with all that said, we are talking about keeping good records that can, justify or help your cause if you find yourself in a disagreement. It's always a good idea. Anybody involved with the project should be able to be an audience for what you're recording. Again, I'm not going to share it, but you really should. You could find yourself in a situation where, I don't know, let's say you're working as a design engineer for a company making new products, and your manager comes in at lunch and says, hey, this project we did a couple months ago, legal teams has let me know we've got a patent infringement lawsuit they're filing. I need all records we've got. So get whatever notebooks and records you had from that time period, get them to me by lunch. Right. And so that's not an unrealistic scenario if you're working on that kind of work. So again, just keep that in mind. I'm not going to judge what you put in there so long as I can tell you're making progress. Okay. So again, what do you put in there? These are good things to put in there. Put in there what is relevant to you and your project that you've done this week. Any planning, we talked last time, we talked about breaking up the problem into bite-sized chunks. What do you want to accomplish today? What do you want to get done when you get here later in the week? And then what do you want to be ready to tackle as you head out for the weekend? These are good things to put in there. I can tell you from personal experience, when I'm working with a group of, on some kind of committee or something like that, if I will, in the last group meeting, if I'll make, my last entry, there is a quick summary and then what we plan to do between now and the next time we meet. Then when I crack that notebook open at the next time I meet with this particular group, and I can say, oh yeah, after we exchange pleasantries, I can say, oh yeah, we said I was going to do this. Here's my report. How does, you guys mentioned you were going to try to tackle this? How are we doing on that? It gives you a bookmark so you can come right back to, and you're ready to tackle right back in where you are. And talk about, did we get this accomplished, or no, here's what I ran into. Here's where we're gonna have to go from here. I mentioned any kind of references you want to be able to possibly use when you're writing your report, or get to the person that's writing the report, whatever you as a group choose to do with that. Any measurements, if you go with Mr. Lynch and take measurements on something, or you do kind of some trial runs with the prototype, any kind of measurements about why it was or was not a success. These are all good things to put in. And just as an example, again, It's up to you as the individual what you think is important. As I mentioned, I'm looking to make sure there's dates on there so I can see clear progression. If you've got something you're really trying to protect, some idea that you want to make sure that you've got access to, you want to prove when this idea was generated, and potentially file for some kind of a patent or copyright or something like that. A way you can do that is you sign it, you've already put a date on it, you sign it as an individual, and you have somebody that you trust read it. Somebody you trust not going to sell it out or take credit for it out from under you. Have them basically witness it, right? Have them read it, somebody that should have an idea what they're looking at, read it, they sign it and date it. And it just provides an additional piece of evidence as to when this idea occurred. You can establish a timeline that would support your cause if you want to try to protect that idea. Okay. Questions so far? So again, your PPR is going to be a good tool for both you and I keeping records as you move forward, but it's really going to be very handy as you're trying to learn, generate new knowledge, or you're trying to learn whatever knowledge exists for your particular problem. And as you move into the phase where we start generating ideas based on that knowledge that hopefully are good solutions to the problem that we've got presented. That moves us up to what we call synthesis, which a lot of times people will call synthesis brainstorming. What we want to talk about today is that brainstorming is a very specific type of synthesis, or at least it's a fairly common type of synthesis. I shouldn't say it's specific, it is pretty broad. Well, let's talk about what synthesis is first. Synthesis in general is a pretty straightforward idea. You can see here kind of some generic things, putting together building blocks into a larger whole. We take small ideas and try to put them together into one larger thing. Trying to be creative in how we do that, and then making sure based on our problem statements, trying to generate ideas that fit those specifications, but are general enough to still accomplish the need. So synthesis on its face isn't too terribly complex. What's the real challenge here is what we call barriers to synthesis. What are the things that will prevent good creative idea generation from occurring? These are, and we can talk about a few of these here, but the common one here, of course, being knowledge blocks. If there's something where we set this idea aside because none of us really had an idea how to do it, or if you've got an idea and you're just really not sure how to do it in SolidWorks or how you would go about making it, or if it's even printable, that's what we call a knowledge block. And those are pretty simple a lot of times, especially in your group. You just go ahead and push the idea out and say, well, I'm not sure how to do this, but I have this idea. And then it's part of the reason you're in your group. There's a good chance somebody in your group maybe has some skill into how we can do that, or you can run it by me or Mr. Lynch, and we can say, oh, well, maybe it's not this exactly, but here's a way you can do that. I can tell you in SolidWorks, a lot of times, if it's some feature that I maybe have used once or twice or haven't at all, some new feature, a lot of times if I just go to YouTube and type in the name of that feature and how to, and there's probably going to be 3 videos and at least 2 of them are okay. And you go with the one that's got the most thumbs up and watch it, see if it does what you need it to do. But between you and people in your group and again, between my knowledge and the collective knowledge of the internet, try really hard to look at, when you look at something and say, well, I'm not really sure how to do that. Maybe I don't say that or bring that idea up. No, that's part of the reason we're working in groups is there's a good chance somebody in your group knows how to get that done or has some tangential skills that apply, and it gets us to that solution. Perceptual blocks, emotional blocks, cultural blocks, these are all things that can come up, and it's really difficult to identify or be aware of these types of blocks, because a lot of times you're not even aware that you're falling victim to them. Perceptual blocks is where we imagine constraints that don't exist, or we apply rules that maybe don't make sense, whatever the case may be, or if you're not 100% neurotypical, it's really easy to just get overloaded with we call it paralysis by overanalysis, where there's just too many decisions and too many different directions which way to go, and we're just not sure how to proceed. These are all very simple traps that we can fall into that are, unless you know that about yourself and the way you process, you don't even know that you're doing it. This is one I didn't notice. I didn't have this in this particular set of slides, but I normally do it with my intro class. I want to do it with you guys. There's this thought experiment. We put 9 dots in a grid. We say connect the 9 dots with 4 lines, not picking up the writing utensils. I know several of you had intro with me before, so several of you know this, or at least you've seen this one. Maybe you don't remember it. Now, and the way this works, again, we're talking about perceptual blocks where you imagine constraints that don't actually exist. And the idea behind this one is it's real common. Again, you're supposed to draw 4 lines, not pick up your pencil. And a lot of people will just inadvertently find themselves trying to stay in the box. And this is a classic, you have to think outside the box approach, right? It's literally one of the things that's talking about is you have to think outside the box. I'm unaware of a solution inside the box, but I didn't say you had to stay inside the box. 4 lines gets it done, as long as you don't make rules that don't actually exist. You talk to, I always try to make it very clear with the groups that you don't have to 3D print everything. We can definitely do off the shelf things. But I didn't say we have to 3D print everything. Just be aware of that. Don't try your best to not add additional constraints that don't actually exist. And the biggest thing, again, because you're in groups, the biggest thing is if you're not sure about something, say, well, I've got this idea, but I don't think it works because, and then you push that out and somebody's like, well, actually, no, I don't think that's not a problem. Or sometimes it might be, well, if we change this one thing, though, this might not be a problem. Right? So again, these are all just different constraints that are easy to put on yourself, different blocks that will prevent good synthesis. Emotional blocks, very, very difficult to detect because this a lot of times comes into your culture, your psyche, to where it's part of your character. You don't even know that it's there because it's just how you think about things, how you go about things. And this is you don't push forward an idea or don't talk about an idea, or you don't even realize your brain doesn't even think about a particular idea because of things like fear of failure, need for approval. My favorite is when you find yourself in an environment where I think we can point to some companies today that very much have the mindset of, well, if it's such a great idea, why haven't we thought about it, right? And so we haven't thought about this idea, so that's got to be a terrible idea. And it's real easy to not even realize you've fallen into that trap. Okay. Especially if you're in an organization that has had lots of success over the years and they're happy to just kind of ride that success and don't necessarily want to think about or do anything innovative. It's just really easy to fall into that mindset. I'm going to pause the video because I don't want to record a YouTube video of me showing you a YouTube video, but at any rate, I'll pull this up and have it queued up, and then I'm going to pause the recording. But so this is killing ideas harms your future. So those of you out there watching this, that's what you want to go find. Again, the big point there is just it's really difficult to not realize sometimes you're trapped in that mindset of, well, I'm not even going to say that. It's going to be a terrible idea because of different factors, right? It really does take a challenge within yourself sometimes to kind of grow to a point where you're willing to consider different ideas. That we're talking about we're at this point, there are no bad ideas. We really have to try to challenge ourselves to think about what are some good or possible creative ideas, and then we'll sort out later what are the bad ideas. There are bad ideas. right? They're bad ideas. If we are very much in this phase where we're trying to generate ideas, we really need to be very careful about trying to sort out the bad ideas. That comes later. That comes later. Right now, we just need ideas. What are the ideas? A strategy for helping us put together and generate ideas is what we call brainstorming. Right? Most common, well-known type of synthesis method, very powerful tool, can be done a number of different ways. A very common way of doing this is you just set a group of people around, especially if you can get a group of people from different backgrounds, because they're going to have different ideas. They're going to have different sets of perceptual blocks that maybe your strengths can complement their weaknesses and vice versa. But you just have a group of people set down around some blank media, a sheet of paper, a computer screen, a whiteboard, whatever it may be. And we just start spitting out ideas. Okay, this is our problem we're trying to solve. I need some ideas. Go. All right. And don't just stop at like 2 or 3. Challenge yourself as a group to get to like 10 or 15. Because what will happen is you'll start coming up with the out of the box, the weird, strange ideas that normally your typical perceptual blocks, cultural blocks would prevent you from doing. But if you challenge yourself to really come up with a bunch, sometimes you get some really interesting ideas that will spin other ideas off of. I always tell this story. I had I think it was a freshman or sophomore level design course, where it might have been kind of an equivalent to this class. And I think on our midterm, there was a question of list 15 uses for a belt or 10 uses for a spoon or something like that. And the challenge there is just to get you to think in a kind of creative terms. And again, as I mentioned, don't just stop at like 2 or 3, because at 2 or 3, you're going to come up with the obvious solutions. If you challenge yourself to list a good 10 or so, then you really have to start digging into the weird things or the random things, the stuff that we wouldn't normally think of. And the reason those are helpful, again, is this idea of don't, if somebody spouts something out, it's like, man, that's a bad idea. Don't just hold on to that. There comes a time when we sort out the bad ideas. That's here. Right? When we're here, there's no bad ideas at this point. And try to work together, help each other as a group. Remind us, hey, no, there's no bad ideas yet. Those come later. Maybe that gets sorted out later, and we'll talk about how do we use those sometimes as additional springboards for better ideas, even the ones that are weird or out there, or maybe just in general bad. Another thing to think about is, and again, this is where it comes down to that, list out at least 10 things. It will force you to take kind of conventional things or conventional thinking and look at it and spin it in unconventional ways. Again, a wonderful practice is, all right, let's list 10 uses for a spoon, and we go, and that gets us, sometimes you'll come up with really funny things, and it kind of breaks the ice and gets you going, actually. And then that way, then you can go on from there and tackle, okay, I need 10 ideas for how we bolt this thing down, or how do we attach it to whatever the existing apparatus is. As I mentioned, there's several ways you can conduct brainstorming. That's just kind of your traditional brainstorming, again, where a group of you sit around a sheet of paper or a computer screen and you start listing ideas out. I've definitely seen in groups like this where you'll do some sort of an idea purge, an idea trigger. So a lot of times I'll hear groups say, okay, everybody go home overnight, brainstorm ideas, come back, and we'll talk about them when we get back. That's okay. You're basically doing kind of an idea purge and trigger type format, where individually each person's going to come up with ideas, and then when you get back, you're going to read them to each other, and there's a very good chance that somebody's idea is going to trigger another different idea or spin or riff them together in somebody else's ideas, right? And so there's going to be some things that are going to match, there's going to be some things that are going to build and add to each other. That's perfectly fine. Again, there's multiple ways you can do this. Just make sure we're capturing those ideas. If this is what you're doing, is everybody go out, generate your own ideas, come back, and let's read them and read them to each other. Make sure you're capturing which of those you want to try to move forward with. You're going to need them for your report, because again, in your report, you're going to want to explain to me, here's some of the ideas we came up with. This is the one we move forward with. This is the reason we think it's the best idea. As I mentioned, brainstorming is the most common type of synthesis. It is not the only one. There are a couple of others that we can point to, different ways of generating or synthesizing new ideas. One of those is what we call inversion. Very good tool to have in your toolkit as an engineer is, how can I break it? How is this thing going to break? Right? If it's going to break, and then we'll talk about this in evaluation a little bit about safety. If we think about how can this break, then sometimes we can go back and strengthen up where it's going to break, or predict where it's going to break, or even design it in such a way that it will break and fail safely. That's a whole nother discussion. But if you will look at something, I always like to say, how can I make this suck? Right? How can I make this worse? If you'll think about it in that context, and there's part of the reason we have you guys take all this calculus is we want you to think about the universe in terms of functions and what are the independent and dependent variables? What are the things I can control, and how is that going to modify or change the output? And if I change these 2 or 3 parameters, how is that going to change the overall? So if I make this one parameter worse, does that make the thing that I want it to happen worse, or does it make it better? Right? Common example I always like to give is, if we think about ways I can make this building more energy efficient, for example. Well, it's pretty easy to start generating ideas if I think about, how can I make this building really energy inefficient? How can I make this building worse? And then the obvious solutions start popping up, right? Make it terrible at managing heat and cooling in HVAC systems. Make the lights stay on all the time. Make sure these computers that they never go to sleep. These are very simple things I can do to make the building very energy efficient, which immediately points to you, oh, those are things I can control and change, and those are very easy to make energy efficient change. Okay? And the last one I'll mention here is this idea of kind of goes back to using creative things in conventional objects in non-conventional ways. You never know when some problem like what you're dealing with has been solved in some other related industry, right? And especially as you guys start breaking this thing down into smaller pieces. I think each one of these projects, you've come up with an overall problem definition, but there's probably going to be 3 or 4 smaller sub-problems in there. And as you find those small sub-problems, you'll want to identify those and figure out how we can go about solving the smaller sub-problem. What are the solutions? And you work your way forward from there. And this is a good example where you never know when something, some solution for a sub-problem you identify has already been solved in a very similar process. So as engineers, I would always challenge you to, any chance you get to go tour a manufacturing facility or facility where they make things, they solve problems, or problems have already been solved, and kind of just store away, hey, that's a neat way to do that thing, or something like it. And then when you hit this point where I need some solutions to some problem, you're armed with some additional information. If anybody ever watch How It's Made, yeah, it's a wonderful, it's a documentary series where they go through and they look at all these different manufacturing processes. For me, it's a nice way to catch a nap after, about an episode and a half, right? If it's interesting for a bit, and then I go to sleep. I've actually kind of enjoyed it more on my social media reels. If I'll just get like little short clips of some of those, it's pretty cool. But you can train your algorithms to show you those once in a while. Anyway, again, knowing when something very similar to what you're dealing with solves or very closely solves the problem, a small sub-problem that you're trying to work on, is a very good tool to have. Again, it's one of those, if you don't get knowledge, it's hard to apply the knowledge. Okay. All right, guys, questions, comments, complaints from me? Okay. You guys know what to do. If you don't, you need to figure that out. I'll let you guys get to it.